that he received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Well, Rock is just the latest celebrity to announce that he has COVID. The list also includes Wendy Williams, and the pandemic isn't showing signs of letting up. Virologist and infectious disease expert Dr. Lane Rowling is back with us this Sunday to talk about the latest on COVID. Doc, good evening to you. You know, obviously this is something, like I said, isn't slowing down. So what do you think about FDA's recommendation to only offer the boosters to 65 and up and to those who've only received the Pfizer vaccination? Is that putting everyone at risk by delaying the shots?
Good evening, Brittany, and happy Sunday evening to the BNC staff. But to your question, absolutely not. We have to understand that, that we have a long way to go in this process. And like I said before you really have a good policy, you really have to understand the medicine science behind the vaccination programs, period, end of story. I've talked about this over many programs and I've said this and I'll repeat it again, is that the antibodies that neutralizing that are produced by the vaccine only last for 85 days. There's a reason why you have to get a booster shot. Some people are going to get 2 or 3 booster shots for the next 50 years. That is a fact because there is no long-term immunity to any coronavirus infection, in particular the SARS-CoV virus with all these new variants. Mm-hmm. The reality here is this, that as we go through this process, the science will catch up with the medicine, and the medicine will catch up with the science. But right now, the bottom line is that everybody's still trying to figure it out, and that is a big controversy here. Here's a question for you. If you go ahead and you say people, you're going to get the vaccine, and you realize that even though people like Rock and other people have been vaccinated and still get a breakthrough infection, what does that tell you about the vaccine platform? Maybe they need to go back and change the vaccine platform to give people better confidence in it, where the science says, well, you get this vaccine, we can guarantee you're not going to get a breakthrough infection, and in particular, getting breakthrough infections to minorities and people that have disabilities and immunocompromised people. That is a very big issue, Brittany.
And Doc, when you talk about changing the vaccine platform, and I'm following you there, how long does it normally take for them to be able to say, okay, we put out this vaccine earlier this year, right? And then also, are they constantly doing the research to keep upping the vaccine as we go through this process? Is that how that works?
Well, that's how it's supposed to work. It's always an evolution. And that's why science is beautiful. You make a theory, hypothesis, and you prove it. The reality here is that we got this vaccine in a record time within a year. The vaccine has not even been out in a year, and we're making leaps and bounds, not me, but people out there saying how effective it is, how efficient it is, and the science does not back that. If that was the case, then we would not have any SARS-CoV virus infection if the platform was that good. What do I mean by that? You have to understand that this particular vaccine platform, I don't care if it's Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and all the other vaccine platforms out there, were off of the Wuhan strain from 2 years ago. What does the Wuhan strain vaccine platform made for that virus have anything to do with the Delta strain, the Mu strain, the Lambda strain, the Charlie 1-2 strain, and all the different variants that are coming down? It takes 3 to 10 years to make a vaccine that's been tried, true, effective effectiveness, understanding what the real world implication of the vaccine, what happens when you inject pregnant females, people that have disabilities, people that are immunocompromised, and then you study the results. And then you can say with a probability that this is a vaccine effectiveness that you're going to get in that particular population. In this vaccine, we haven't had that because the vaccine doesn't have that type of long-term study. We're doing still figuring it out as the vaccine's being rolled out, and that's a very, very dangerous road that we're going down.
And what about kids, Doc? Because we've been seeing, obviously, the kids spreading the virus across the school. What do you believe is the greatest risk in giving boosters to kids and teens? Dr. Fauci mentioned more data is needed. What would they need to determine if it's safe for children?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. They're going to have to do some significant research, Brittany. I'm telling you, when you start talking about injecting pediatric children, the American Pediatric Association came out a month ago and says by no means necessary that you should be injecting this children under 12 years of age with this vaccine because the study has not been done. Here's the reality. I like to use this. You take a 12-year-old kid that has cerebral palsy, congenital deformities. Maybe they have congenital defects in the arms, mental handicapped also. And that person's being taken care of by their family members, changing diapers every day. You're going to go ahead and give some kid a vaccine that you have no proof that really shows long-term effect. And what happens if that person has an adverse effect? Who's going to be responsible for changing that kid's diaper, feeding that child, and taking care of this child for years? So when you start going down that type of road, you better make sure that your science and medicine is backed with the facts and not what I think, what I feel good. And you cannot be rushing science. Science takes time, years sometimes, to prove a theory.
Yeah. And Doc, switching gears a little bit, because we know a number of employers are going this route, with the religious exemption being a valid excuse for employees to opt out of getting vaccinated. Will this have an impact on getting closer to herd immunity? What do you think?
Well, absolutely correct. We're never going to get herd immunity because we're going to have a certain amount of the population that are going to be resistant to getting vaccines. Religious exemptions, people that are immunocompromised that cannot get the vaccine itself. That is why in the beginning of this whole the debate initially a year ago, we need to have a uniform policy. If we're going to have herd immunity at 90% where the population has active immunity based off of natural immunity itself, getting the infection, or getting the vaccine, we have to have a common goal. And with the vaccine, I think we're never going to make that. And especially when we start talking about having medical exemptions and also religious exemption, there's always going to be a population that's going to be resistant to that type of change. And the reality is that if one individual, a kid on an Indian reservation, a kid in a small town in rural Arkansas, does not get that vaccine, or a kid in a rural village in Africa, that individual will be the source of the next pandemic. And this is why we have all these different variants out here, because we haven't had an effective game plan to try to conquer the virus all at one time.
Yeah. And just for those who don't know, Dr. Rowling, who they're considering getting the booster shot when they are able to do so, actually. Could you talk about why they aren't permitted to mix the vaccines, though, since the booster shot right now is Pfizer, the only one on that list?
Well, because each of these have a different platform. The company has a different preparatory way they made their vaccine. And when you start mixing vaccines like that, that have really no true, what I call virulent or effectiveness in the real world, then that's what happens. You can start creating these super mutations. The scientists already said in England that the problem that we're going to have with this is that when we're injecting folks with these vaccines that are already infected, that virus gets the opportunity to see that vaccine and mutate. And this is part of the mutation of viruses, is the natural selection to be able to survive. So you have to mutate and change so you can create a super virus. But back to your question on that, the reality, Brittany, is that we have a long ways to go. And when you start talking about injecting children, that's a whole different ball game, because the consequences are significant. And the reality is that if we get past this, we have to have a holistic approach from everything from education to vaccines to treatment to long-term management, wearing masks, washing hands, and be as a community as a whole and not just as individuals.
Well, once that data starts rolling in, I'll be curious to see what happens next. Dr. Elaine Rowling, we always appreciate you every Sunday.